I know it's a book, but hold on. GGY from the new Tales of the Pizzaplex book just blew Security Breach wide open, and we have to talk about it. No time to waste. Put on your apron slices. Let's bake ourselves a theory. Okay, for those not in the know, the Tales from the Pizzaplex books have been pretty forthcoming in their canonicity to the game's timeline. Many of you may know that the Silver Eyes and the Fazbear Frights novels take place in their own canon timeline. It's the book's timeline with the game timeline. They're not directly canon to one another, but some elements remain the same or lend themselves to explain parts from other timelines. Some things in the books can explain the games and vice versa. We've gotten very little word about how that would work with the Tales from the Pizzaplex books though. However, some of these stories seem very important, and a lot of them seem pretty one-to-one with the games. We even get a story detailing how Burntrap may have been delivered to the Pizzaplex in the first place. So when we got to see the story list for this new book coming in March, our jaws collectively dropped when we saw one title in particular, GGY. Is this a story that'll finally tell us more about Gregory? Originally, we had to wait until March 7th, but the incredible Tom on the Reddit Discord, link in the cards, did a live reading. So now we have all the details, and they are juicy. So let's go over a brief and summarized version of the live reading that Tom did. Tony, a 12-year-old middle schooler, is assigned a group project where he has to write a story about a mystery. He wants to find one in the real world, and him and his friends choose to do it with pen names. Tony goes by Tarbell, his one friend goes by Boots for Puss in Boots, and his other friend, a new kid with unruly brown hair, goes by Rab, short for Dr. Rabbit. In search for a real-life mystery to write about, Tony finds that a lot of the arcade machines at the Pizzaplex have unreasonably high scores, all with the initials GGY. So he starts to ask around to see if he can figure out who this GGY is. First, he asks some arcade goers, these two girls who go by KXT and CRF on arcade machines. They point him to a kid named Axel. He doesn't know. He then goes to an employee. The employee has to deal with something, but the employee tells Tony his theory on who GGY is. He thinks that a kid probably stole a security badge to get in after hours, because not only does GGY have impossibly high scores, no one has ever seen this kid. As Tony started to scheme, he noticed that Glamrock Freddy was just deadpan staring at him. Like he walked up to him, stopped, and just stared at him in a cold, weird, robotic way. So he got freaked out and he left. He's 12 years old. When he got home though, he made a bunch of forum accounts to look for any more information. Eventually, somebody DM'd him, warned him that he was in over his head, but told him to DM them again tomorrow for more information. The next day, Tony steals a security badge himself to get access to the databases. He then searches for GGY and found out that someone under the username GGY did in fact get a play pass, essentially a Dave & Buster's charge card, but it's been modified. So much so that it could essentially be used as a security badge to get into the building. He also found out that GGY's badge was used to let in somebody named Mary and two more people, someone with the letters RAE and someone with the letters TRE, all of which were after hours at separate times. He leaves that kiosk to find that Glamrock Freddy is just straight up following him. So again, he runs away. He DMs the forum person again and they say to meet up at the high school. When he goes there, it's actually CRY. Crystal, the girl from the arcade way back in the beginning. She tells him again that he's way over his head, but she tells him why she knows this. She's a bit of a hacker herself, and she hacked into the animatronics one day to try to figure out how they worked. But when she was in there, she noticed a lot of weird protocols that would have them do actions that they don't normally do. And throughout these protocols, sort of like a signature, the letters G and Y were all over them. So she knows whoever this GGY is an incredibly talented hacker. Tony writes all of this for his assignment on his mystery about GGY. While Tony was writing the story, he overheard on the TV that the school guidance counselor Mary Schneider was still missing, and he shows it to his friends Rab and Boots. Rab sees it, doesn't make an expression, puts it in his backpack and says that he'll help work on it later. Later on, Tony finally puts together that the Mary that's missing could be the very same Mary that went on GGY's pass. So he sneaks into the school, into the librarian's office, and gets into the school database. He finds out that the school has actually gone through 4 guidance counselors since the Pizzaplex opened. Mary was the first, and then 2 more went missing before the current one they have now, Raylan and Trina, matching the other 2 names that were on GGY's pass. Tony wonders if the counselors caught on to GGY's plans and planned to turn him in, but then he brought them to the Pizzaplex to silence them. The next day, he gets his story back and it's completely ruined. Now it's about this fantasy wizard. All of this was Rab's doing. He calls Boots Ellis by his real name and said he's done with the pen names because he's so mad about their friendship. Tony gets detention for sneaking into the library the day before, but likely he got detention from a snitch because he was outside of the cameras. Then, while he's in detention, Rab comes in to talk to him, or since he's still mad at him, he calls him by his real name, Greg. Gregory apologizes for changing the story, but then convinces Tony to cheer him up by bringing him to the Pizzaplex. Okay, this story is a lot, and it's a bombshell. I mean, so that's our ingredients, let's mix them. To bullet point it super simply, a new kid at school with unkempt brown hair and the name Gregory is hacking into the arcades and animatronics and possibly killing counselors. Blah. So right away, this pretty much confirms that Patient 46 is Gregory. After all, Patient 46 is described to be a child, an expert hacker, and actively messing with the Pizzaplex. This all fits perfectly. Frankly, the only thing that goes against it now is that some translations used a female pronoun when referring to Patient 46, but that could just be a mistranslation or something that didn't come across on the translation team. So if that's the only thing going against it, it's not very strong evidence. But Gregory being Patient 46 is huge for the story of Security Breach, and also wildly confusing. By all accounts, Patient 46 is working with Vanny, possibly even manipulating her. So if that's the case, why the hell do we see Gregory hiding from her for the entire game? And why does he fight Afton if he's working for him? Something isn't adding up here. While we think about that, let's go over some other information we got from these books. Straight away, there's a fan theory that I need to quash. I've seen some people saying that Crystal might be the girl on the cover of the Ruin poster. Frankly, I think this is from people who didn't read the live reading from Entom, because Crystal's a high schooler. That's not a high schooler, that's a little girl. Although, I do think GGY tells us who this girl might be. I didn't mention it because it's not important to the plot of GGY, but that's why I think it's important to the plot of Security Breach. When the employee had to go deal something, he had to deal with a girl named Amelia with pigtails freaking out about Fruity Maze giving her game over, kicking it and screaming. She eventually gets dragged out of the Pizzaplex. It's a weird scene because it has nothing to do with anything else in the story, but the fact that she's directly described and pointed out and then left as an open-ended bookmark makes me think that she's the perfect candidate to be this girl with pigtails that we see in the Ruin poster. This book also seems to imply that Gregory had some sort of security pass to freely go throughout the building before Security Breach. But during Security Breach, he doesn't have it. Someone must have deactivated it or taken it away. Someone like Vanessa, who's on the security team. But if that's the case, we have to again ask why? What made Gregory turn if he was evil and now isn't? Was he ever evil at all? Did he ever turn from being evil? Is it all an act? It just doesn't make sense yet. Kind of like watching this far into the video without hitting the subscribe button. Just saying, doesn't make any sense. I'm just saying. We've got cats. Then again, look at the Ruin poster. Gregory is saying, help me. Is this a trap by Afton? Is Gregory actually asking for help? Did he actually turn good? It's unclear. At this point, I was just stumped. So I gave up and went on Twitter. And lo and behold, people smarter than me in this amazing community already came up with some amazing theories. Two of them in particular seem incredibly likely to me. First off, we have @HorrificHymns on Twitter. They go by Ava or T, and their thread is massive. Link in the cards to go check it out. I highly recommend it. But it has to do with proving that Gregory wasn't actually evil in GGY. He just wasn't Gregory. Rather, he was taken over by Afton just like Vanny. She shows this by going into details about the differences between Gregory from the story and Gregory from Security Breach. For clarity's sake, from here on out, when I'm referring to Gregory in the stories, I'll say GGY, but if I'm referring to Security Breach, I'll just say Gregory. She notes that GGY chose the pen name Dr. Rabbit because it just came to him, and he's described as often saying deep, interesting things. What do we hear Gregory say in Security Breach?
I don't know, I'm just a kid.
But for an even bigger difference, in the thread he mentions that GGY as Patient 46 is clearly manipulating Vanessa and working with Vanny. But then we come to Security Breach, and Gregory doesn't even know who Vanessa or Vanny are. He practically can't remember his own name. And he keeps this up even when there's no one around to act innocent for. This possession isn't even a new concept. Ava points out that Vanessa was possessed with the VR machines, so it's possible that the arcade machines could have possessed Gregory. But somehow he was freed right before Security Breach. For more evidence, there is another thread, link in the cards, by Michael O 2000. He really goes deep on the therapy logs here, trying to show that Gregory doesn't have to be a robot for any of this to work. The therapist finds records of Gregory's great childhood, something that GGY wouldn't have given, but something that Gregory wouldn't have if he was a robot. In the thread, they also mention that the rewrite that GGY did to Tony's story mentions that GGY was the favorite apprentice of the wizard. This is subtly telling us that Afton has multiple apprentices, and his favorite one is Gregory, because GGY wasn't an apprentice at all. He was a puppet under the total control of Afton. In the thread, they point out that Patient 46 likes disguises because it makes him feel invisible. And that's just what Patient 46 is, a disguise for Afton. Again, a massive shout out to these amazing folks. Go follow them on Twitter and wherever else they are. And with these analyses under our belt, the information from GGY, Security Breach, and Help Wanted, I think we can finally solve exactly what happens to Gregory, Vanessa, and Afton between Help Wanted and Security Breach. So let's pop this mixture into the oven and watch some horrors rise. I think Afton was working directly through GGY, but I don't think the possession happened from an arcade machine. After all, GGY is a new kid in town, and he came around when the Pizzaplex showed up. We also know that Patient 46 and Vanessa were getting therapy before the Pizzaplex, or at least before and during the Pizzaplex. So the arcades wouldn't have been there yet. At least they wouldn't have been there before therapy started, which, I mean, therapy probably started because of how GGY was acting or just to keep an eye on Vanessa. I think that Gregory was taken over by Afton via a VR headset implemented by Vanny. We have a source code conversation presumably between Glitchtrap and Vanny that ends with, "Have you selected one? I have." I think this is what they're talking about. They need to get Glitchtrap out of the VR game before it publishes so that they can transfer him into something more secure. Gregory was sort of a vessel for Afton, and with Vanny in the physical world to ensure that Gregory couldn't escape like the last two tried to, this would have been a perfect transfer, leading to Gregory being fully taken over by Afton, turning Gregory into just a puppet, turning him into GGY. That way, GGY is able to hack into Fazbear Entertainment and get Vanessa the job, because Afton is the one doing it. Afton can personally see and implement the hacking and manipulating of the animatronics and the arcade machines to make sure that they're ready to take the Glitchtrap virus. He even modified the animatronics to watch over and protect Gregory and Vanessa, because he knows that GGY's body needs to stay safe and Vanessa's job needs to stay intact for this plan to work. He doesn't want to risk his entire existence, so he takes his time to make sure that the defenses are down and that the Burntrap corpse is put together enough to take the Glitchtrap virus. Finally, the night arrives. Glitchtrap and Vanny are ready to implement the Glitchtrap virus. All the other human staff have been killed, fired, or sent away, and it's just Vanny and GGY. It was time to take the Glitchtrap virus out of GGY and put it into the Pizzaplex. But when Glitchtrap leaves Gregory wakes up, dazed and confused, and just runs away. At this point, the Glitchtrap virus is in all the animatronics and spreading through the arcade machines. Afton, trying to find Gregory, tests out his new abilities in Glamrock Freddy and searches for him. Finally, he spots Gregory in the crowd, but here's the kicker. Glamrock Freddy was programmed to protect the body of GGY, and the Glitchtrap virus just said to go capture it. So suddenly we have two directly competing objectives: get Gregory and protect Gregory. That's why Freddy shuts down, but then he reboots into safe mode, flushing out the Afton virus, and thus the beginning of Security Breach. That's why Vanessa insists that tonight is not the night to mess with her. Tonight was supposed to be the night they bring back Afton. That's why Freddy shuts down. That's why Gregory has a hard time remembering his own name at the beginning of the game. He's been unconscious for who knows how long. And that's how Gregory, as Patient 46, can have a good childhood but seem homeless. Because at this ending, he's not homeless. He just woke up somewhere he's never been before, confused and scared. He just went off to hide. As far as he's aware, he got a fun opportunity to test out a new VR game, and he woke up with no idea where he was, surrounded by people trying to kill him. This is quite possibly the strongest I've felt about a theory about Security Breach. Guys, for real, y'all need to chill. Ever since the pages have started leaking from this character Encyclopedia, Reddit and Twitter, why do we say Reddit but not Fritter? God, I want to Fritter right now. Fredit and Fritter has been enraged on all the terrible inaccuracies in this book and how we can't use this book because it's so wildly inconsistent and just not useful at all. I'm sorry, but that's not the case. Look, Slices, put on your aprons, because we're going to go through every single inconsistency I can find in this book, but then we'll talk about the really juicy details and lore that we actually get from reading it, things that it does confirm and hints that it gives us. And I think this book can actually be a super useful refresher and a starting point for a lot of people just getting into the lore in 2023, which is not an easy task. First, let's gather our ingredients. Now, I did go through this book and find every single error that I could, and I went online to make sure that I didn't miss anything. But I do want to clear the air here. Some of the things that I'm going to mention are just editing mistakes. Literally, a sentence was typed in wrong or missing grammar or something like that. Super minor things that get lost in the translation of writing a 200+ page book on funny bear animatronics. But there's a couple lore points that some people online have been calling mistakes. I'm going to point them out. But stick with me, we have to consider the possibility that if something in this book directly contradicts lore from a previous game, it could be a retcon. I know, we hate the word retcon, I hate the word retcon, but there is a chance that some of these points might be trying to do that. It's not like FNAF has never retconned something in the past. One of the highest points of the entire franchise, I think so at least, is Henry's speech in FNAF 6. It's one of the best story moments we got in this entire game series. One of the only direct story moments, but still, it's an amazing speech. And it retcons FNAF 2. Henry pretty directly states that this is his daughter in this minigame, but in the FNAF 2 minigame, it's called Save Him. This was originally a boy, but come FNAF 6, it was Henry's daughter. That's a retcon, so just keep it in the back of your mind that some of these lore mistakes could be purposeful retcons. It's something to consider at least. First error / retcon is actually on page 2. Well, that's what people have been saying, but I think there's a misreading here. The last location on the opening section reads, "Finally, there's the bedroom, where a child is haunted by terrible memories of a visit to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. A lot of people have come out to say that this is inaccurate, because the crying child has terrible memories of Fredbear's Family Diner. That, and it's likely that in FNAF 4 we're playing as Michael Afton, not the crying child. I'll get to that second point later on, but I want to point out that if we're assuming the crying child is the player in FNAF 4, the nightmares would be of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica, as far as we know, are not at Fredbear's Family Diner. If the nightmares were solely based around Fredbear's Family Diner, we would only be being chased by a nightmare Fredbear and a nightmare Spring Bonnie, something that doesn't exist. Moving on, it seems that Golden Freddy appearing in Sister Location could be an error. However, one of the difficulty settings in Custom Night is listed as Golden Freddy, so there is a chance that this is what it's referring to. It's hard to say. One of my biggest critiques of this book actually is I wish they were more upfront about what counts as a game appearance, because sometimes something will just appear on one poster in one screenshot, and suddenly that means that animatronic was in that game, so it gets a little confusing on what exactly constitutes a game appearance. I think it would have been better if they separated it into game appearance and game cameo. But with this book, this is what we have. Next error, it says that Bon Bon was in FNAF 3. I looked at every camera, that's fair, I cannot see Bon Bon anywhere in here. Unless it's trying to say that any Bonnie hand puppet is a Bon Bon, but even then I couldn't find one of those either, so if you find one, let me know. Weirdly though, it mentions that Bon Bon is female. That's fine, I assumed Bon Bon was male, but I could have been wrong there. The error comes in that it then immediately says Bonette is the first female version of Bonnie introduced in the games. Technically, they're introduced in the same game and Bon Bon is introduced first. So if Bon Bon is a girl, Bon Bon would be the first female Bonnie variant. It's a very technical error, but it is an error nonetheless. This next one technically isn't an error, but what the hell is this toy Chica render? This is terrifying. The beak is the wrong color and the teeth just look wrong. I don't know. Something went wrong here, and frankly, it's more terrifying than any render I've ever seen of toy Chica. This next one is an editing error, and it's wrong, but it's funny. I'm just gonna read this out entirely. On Phantom Foxy's page, we have, he's in a worse state than Withered Foxy, as his hook hand has gone astray. And in FNAF 3, his hook hand has gone astray. So don't get too excited or anything. It's not some huge confirmation or retcon, but I think his hook hand has gone astray. It's hard to tell, but definitely in FNAF 3, Phantom Foxy's hook hand has gone astray. This next one's an odd one. On Endo 01's page, one of the 3 photos they use is actually of Endo 02, which is even weirder considering the very next page is all about Endo 02, so they could have just saved it for that one. Now, this is a big one that I've seen a lot of people mention. The book only ever refers to Mangle as he. Now, there's been a... Now, so far in the franchise, Mangle has always been referred to with he and she pronouns, pretty much switching it up every time they've been mentioned. However, it is important to note 2 things. 1. In FNAF 2, Mangle is only ever referred to as he, as Mangle is just a new version of Foxy. But on the custom night, Mangle is included in Ladies' Night. That's probably where this whole thing came from. However, if Mangle's proper pronouns are he and she, it's not technically wrong to only refer to Mangle with masculine pronouns. After all, I'm non-binary. I go by any all pronouns. I don't really care. But a lot of people default to using he, him for me because, I mean, I present very masculine, I have a deep voice, I get it. But that doesn't change the fact that I do go by all pronouns. You know what I mean? It's not technically saying that Mangle only goes by he, him, it's just that this book only refers to Mangle with he, him. This next one's a bit of an editing fix. On Old Man Consequences page, it does mention that he's in FNAF World, but under game appearances, it only lists him under Ultimate Custom Night. This is a weird one, definitely put it in there, but it could also be a side effect by the fact that none of the FNAF World only characters have their own page here. Frankly, the book really doesn't delve that much into FNAF World. Granted, I understand there's a lot of really weird one-off characters that would fill this book up like crazy, but like, there's like 40 pages of FNAF AR skins. We could swap those with FNAF World and be way better for it. I'm just saying. Regardless, it should mention FNAF World in the Old Man Consequences game appearances. Alright, this is a big one. The book directly states, and I quote, "The crying child is the main character in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. He's terrorized by the nightmare animatronics in his bedroom, but his real story is told in the end of night minigames." Again, I agree with you guys here. I think Michael Afton is the protagonist of FNAF 4. After all, we see Michael draw the nightmare Fredbear animatronic in the security logbook, and in the game itself, the animatronics mirror exactly what they do to Michael in FNAF 1, and we hear the FNAF 1 phone call. I'll admit, I don't have a good answer here. Either this is a pretty big mistake, or very possibly, this might be a very big retcon. It's hard to tell, don't take my word as gospel, but it's one of those 2 things. Or we've been theorizing about FNAF 4 completely wrong, because to be fair, we don't have a lot of confirmations in this game, so the word retcon is kind of strong. This next one isn't necessarily an error, but it's more of a nitpick. For Charlotte Emily's page, they exclusively use pictures of Charlotte Emily from the books, but the text nearly exclusively is talking about Charlotte from the games. So really, we should have gotten some new art like we did for the crying child, talking about Charlotte Emily from the games. More of a nitpick, less of an error. Although I've been noticing people mention this last sentence in the Charlotte Emily section as an error. Quote, "An alternate version of Charlotte who survived childhood appears in the novels." I've seen a lot of people mad at this because, spoilers, Charlotte still dies in the novels. Henry Emily then creates several differently aged Charlotte Emily robots so he can simulate her growing up throughout the years. So the line is wrong to say she survived, but I think this is another misread. I don't think this line is wrong. I think it's just being misinterpreted. Read it again. "An alternate version of Charlotte who survived childhood appears in the novels." This isn't saying that in the novels, Charlotte survived childhood. This is saying specifically an alternate version of Charlotte who survived childhood. Pause, appears in the novels. An alternate version of Charlotte. How else would you describe, besides directly stating the exact plot of the book, a robotic version of Charlotte? It's not saying that the alternate book version of Charlotte survives childhood. This is stating that in the books, there are alternate versions of Charlotte, the robots, that are made to have survived childhood. That's what Charlotte Emily in the books is. An alternate what if Charlotte that had survived childhood. It's very tricky language, but this isn't an error. It's just being misread for vague language. Okay, so that's every single thing I could find and stuff that was pointed out online that I missed that could be considered an error or an inconsistency. The rest of this book is pretty solid and really useful. An incredibly important part of that fact is what it chooses to say. Keep in mind that each character gets at most 2 pages, most of them getting 1. So anything that's said in this book is probably important, or at least any detail that was left in here was left on purpose. Well, what do they point out? Well, on Shadow Freddy's page, it said, will he turn out to be a crucial character in the ongoing mythology of Five Nights at Freddy's? Maybe, maybe not. Time will tell. This is like the only time in the entire book that there's time taken out of a character's page to say, is this person important? Maybe, wink. So this makes me feel like Shadow Freddy is going to be important, possibly soon. After all, RXQ got a leading role in FNAF AR recently, and Shadow Freddy was kind of left out of that. So we have room for Shadow Freddy in any upcoming projects for FNAF. Speaking of RXQ, the page for it states that it's rumored to be made out of Dark Remnant. Now, it says it's rumored, so this isn't a confirmation, but it is a confirmation that Dark Remnant exists in the games, which would conceivably be an equivalent from Agony in the books. The next thing mentioned is actually something that gets pointed out to me a lot in the comments and recently on the Ritos subreddit. That being that Phantom Chica in FNAF 3 is specifically the FNAF 1 model of Chica. Now, Phantom Foxy and Phantom Freddy are the FNAF 2 models, but Phantom Chica is FNAF 1, and it's specifically pointed out, which turns this detail from like a fun Easter egg that maybe Scott lost the model from FNAF 2 and had to use the FNAF 1 model, and suddenly makes it, hey, this is important. Look into why this would be. Another interesting point is it goes into detail on exactly what the Fun Times would do to kidnap a child, each of their roles in this almost like kid heist. It's honestly one of the scarier things presented in a FNAF media that I've seen in a while. The idea that these highly advanced, made to be friendly and approachable animatronics have specific and effective methods of kidnapping children, down to mimicking parents' voices, is chilling to think about. It calls on some of my favorite SCPs. Also, shout out Yarg Foxy. This is goddamn adorable and I want 10 of them. Seriously, Funko, U2s, I don't care. Somebody make Yarg Foxy real. I need this in my life. Listen, I've got a P.O. box, send me Yarg Foxy, please. I swear to God, I'll do 20 ads for you. I don't care, I want Yarg Foxy. An interesting thing to note is us receiving official names for these creatures from the FNAF 3 minigames, Shadow Puppet and Shadow Balloon Boy. Not only are these pointed out as important and nameable characters, but they share a naming convention with Shadow Freddy, which seems really important and makes me look at these characters in a new light because I kind of just overlooked them. I assumed it was just some weird glitch effect, but this book seems to grab you by the shoulders and say, hey, why are they here? Which is a good question. Oh, this is a super weird one that stuck out to me. On Dee Dee's page, the sentence is, she first appeared as an NPC in FNAF World, an online RPG version of Five Nights at Freddy's that has since been taken offline. A couple things. This was never an online game. And 2, it's still online. You can download it off GameJolt. So either this is like an error, or maybe it's saying that FNAF World was an in-universe game that was an online game that got taken down. But why would it say it in character? This book has been very fourth wall the whole time. It's strange, but it's worth noting. Glitchtrap's page has a really big lore point that I haven't seen many people talk about yet. Now, this could just come down to vague language, but I think it's important to note that the first sentence on Glitchtrap's page is, quote, this mascot only exists digitally. Now, like I said, this could just be saying that Glitchtrap himself only exists digitally, which is true, but it says mascot, which makes me think that this entire costume is a digital-only model, which would mean that this was never a real suit used by William Afton, which feels strange because everyone, myself included, kind of assumed this was either what was over the Spring Bonnie suit in-game or a handmade suit before the Springlock suits were invented. They could have even been the suit mentioned in FNAF 3 when they said less relevant suits were used in the meantime immediately after the Springlock suits. It's really hard to tell, but this sentence could be implying that this model is completely original. which would be weird, so it's worth noting. Next, it's worth pointing out that they really are driving home that a lot of human-looking animatronics were being made and tested in the sister location bunker. MatPat on GT Live went into this on his video on the book and really talked about how this supports the idea that the sister location bunker was made to start making either Elizabeth bots or Charlie bots like FNAF's theory, so it's definitely worth looking into. A couple other things mentioned by MatPat was the fact that it points out you probably shouldn't build over a haunted pizza place, implying that the actual location itself might be haunted in a more traditionally ghost-like story, and also that the mediocre melodies are pointed out to have been made in an attempt to probably avoid copyright. Anyways, moving on. There's a whole section in Montgomery Gator's spread that talks about the Bonnie mystery, talking about how Bonnie was likely destroyed by Monty. Now, we know this from the games, but it's interesting that they took a whole paragraph to point that out, which leads me to believe it's going to be very important for some reason. And we should keep in mind that Montgomery Gator probably destroyed Bonnie, whether under the influence of Burntrap's virus or possibly directly commanded to by Vanny. Hey, speaking of Vanny, y'all doubted me. They're the same person. Suck it. Let's go. Anyway, I also noticed it was important that on William Afton's page, it mentions that the dialogue at the beginning of Sister Location is between Willie and a member of the Fazbear Entertainment board, which is really nice that we have confirmation on who William Afton is speaking to in that cutscene. Sticking with Afton, let's move on to Burntrap and the Blob. First off, it mentions that these are not the canon names for them, which honestly, thank goodness, I'm so tired of blank trap, and the Blob isn't that good of a name. I preferred my original name, The Amalgam, and I might stick with that. Although if William Afton took control of it, I'll probably go with just BKZ's suggestion of Billy Blob. Regardless, also important on Burntrap's page, it mentions that, quote, the spring Bonnie suit has by this time become even more tattered and degraded. So it feels pretty solid as to deconfirm that Glamrock Bonnie's exoskeleton was used to repair Burntrap. It seems to be stating that Burntrap is still just the spring Bonnie suit, which then leads me to the question, why did they axe Bonnie? Now we don't really have a reason for it. On the Crying Child's page, it specifies that idea again, that he saw something to make him afraid, and really emphasizes that, which makes me again wonder, what the hell did he see? And also, it slightly retcons the very ending of those minigames. Maybe not retcons, but corrects is a better word. A lot of theorists, myself included, got tripped up where at the very last line, I will put you back together, is in a slightly different font color. And font color had been consistent up until that point in those minigames, so that felt important. But the book says that the Fredbear plush directly says, quote, you're broken, we are still your friends, I will put you back together. So it seems to be saying that this text color change isn't actually important. Finally, in Elizabeth Afton's section, we get this quote. Michael was following his father's instructions when he went down to Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. This isn't too notable on its own, we know this, but it is the only time in the entire book that they mention Michael Afton. Because for as many characters that are in this encyclopedia, 3 incredibly important characters are nowhere to be found. Cassidy, Fredbear, and Michael Afton. For Cassidy, granted, most of the information we have is speculation, so if they tried to give us any information on Cassidy, it would be a huge confirmation, probably too big for the health of the theorizing community, because either they would deconfirm a hell of a lot of stuff, or confirm things that some fans don't want to care about. I don't know why Fredbear is absent here though. Maybe they don't want to specify what the actual design is, but we see it in Ultimate Custom Night, so frankly I don't know why Fredbear is missing. But I do know why Michael Afton isn't here. And no, sorry, Matt, I don't think it's because he's not an Afton. I think Michael is an Afton. I think he's left out because of the data file. Every single character has a data file at the beginning of their section. It says their name, what they are, the games they appear in, and the novels they appear in. I think Michael was specifically omitted from this book because of the game appearance line. Because outside of Sister Location, we technically don't have confirmation that Michael Afton is the protagonist of any game. So any game they list him being the protagonist of would be a massive confirmation or deconfirmation. It would shake up the entire theorizing landscape permanently. And I don't know if Scott wanted such a massive lore dump to be in this book, especially as a footnote. That feels so important that that might need to come from the games itself. Really, it's a damned if they do, damned if they don't kind of situation. If they don't include Michael Afton, it's like making a Mario encyclopedia and not including Mario. But if they do include Michael Afton, it changes everything permanently. So they probably just erred on the side of caution and left him out, which I respect. All in all, this book is useful. Not only is it useful, but it gives us some pretty big confirmations, and it also gives us some hints on where to look that I know I'm going to be looking into. The vengeful spirit, the one you should not have killed, the dweller of Golden Freddy, Cassidy, is in security breach. But by the time we find her, she's already lost. Slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. I get it, that's a tall claim, but bake with me here for a second. For those unaware, one of the prevailing theories in the community is that Golden Freddy is possessed by the vengeful spirit, one that is vowing to follow Afton wherever he goes, trying to take him down every step of the way, all because the spirit of this vengeful person possessed the Fredbear suit after being stuffed inside it, being killed at the missing child incident. That's why we see Golden Freddy in every game William is in. In FNAF 1, Springtrap is locked in a back room. Golden Freddy is there. FNAF 2, William had just gone on a massacre. Golden Freddy is there. FNAF 3, William returns as Springtrap roaming the halls. Lo and behold, Golden Freddy is there. More than that, if William isn't there, Golden Freddy doesn't make an appearance. FNAF 4, which takes place in the mind of either the crying child or Michael Afton, William isn't there, and we don't see Golden Freddy because of it. Sure, we see Nightmare Fredbear, which is a nightmare version of Fredbear, which eventually becomes Golden Freddy, but Golden Freddy himself does not appear. What about sister location? Sure, it's William's bunker, and Michael Afton is down there, but William is nowhere to be found. And once again, no Golden Freddy. Now, I hear you, what about FNAF 6? Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator. William Afton is here, for the first time named credited, so it's definitely William Afton. But Golden Freddy is nowhere in this game. And that's correct. He isn't. Oh, and you aren't either. And that's correct. Golden Freddy isn't here, but the spirit inside him is. But who is the spirit inside Golden Freddy? Some people, myself included, argue that there are two spirits within the Golden Freddy suit. But even if that's true or not true, I'm just focusing on the vengeful one that's definitely in there. Thanks to the FNAF security logbook, we have a name, Cassidy. Cassidy has to be present at the FNAF 6 fire, mainly because of what we know about Ultimate Custom Night, of which we'll get to in a moment. If Cassidy is present at UCN, she would need to be at the FNAF 6 location when it burned down. And if you look at FNAF 6, there's really only one location that wandering spirits could end up in, Molten Freddy. After all, their erratic movements on top of their weird, almost echoey voice seems to imply that there's multiple drivers of that ship. And of course, we know Golden Freddy is in Ultimate Custom Night, not only as a character that can be brought in by Dee Dee, and not only as the ending cutscene of the game where you get a slowly zooming out cutscene of Golden Freddy twitching, but Golden Freddy is the only animatronic that death coins don't work on. If you try to use a death coin on a Golden Freddy, a Fredbear animatronic jump scares you. The only way you can see the Fredbear animatronic. Alright, so that's the end of Cassidy, right? The original 7 games chronicle her going after William relentlessly until eventually trapping him in Ultimate Custom Night and torturing him forever. Wrap a bow on it, ship it, call it done. But there's 3 games I haven't mentioned yet. Using our previous method of looking for Cassidy, we'll examine them. FNAF AR has Springtrap in it, sure, but we recognize that the animatronics in FNAF AR are recreations, not the real thing. The real William Afton is nowhere to be found, and likewise, Cassidy's presence is pretty much null in this game. But then, what about Help Wanted and Security Breach? They both have an iteration of William Afton, whether digital or physical, but do we have any mentions of Cassidy? Well, sort of, in the form of Princess Quest. Now, I won't spend too much time on the connections between Cassidy and Princess Quest and the reasons why, mainly because Ozone already made an incredible video going over the themes and motifs of Princess Quest and how it can relate to Cassidy. Link there, I recommend you go watch that after you're done here. But for now, very briefly, this princess is Cassidy. Again, lore and analysis reasons, there, after you're done here. But just for now, some hard evidence to hold you over, in one of the patches of Security Breach, the sprite for this character was named Cassidy. So we're gonna roll with it. The Princess Quest minigames were both in Help Wanted and Security Breach, so even with this new digital form of William, there's a digital form of Cassidy hunting him down. Okay, so what? Cassidy's back, that's pretty typical. Well, that's not the whole story, because I don't think the Princess Quest 2 and 3 machines are what they appear at all, because I don't even think Cassidy makes it out of Princess Quest 1. The new Tales from the Pizzaplex books are chock full of lore, and at this point most people know about that. It's what gave us more information about the Mimic, basically confirming that William Afton is dead. And in his stead is a robot with a program intending to recreate his lost legacy, just trying to, well, mimic him. But the Mimic isn't the only important story from Nexi, the 6th book in the series. The story Nexi suggests putting an endoskeleton inside of a body, which leans really hard into Burntrap territory. So then what about the middle story, Drowning? Well, for the uninformed, Drowning tells us the story of Cara and her friends trying out the new VR attraction at the Pizzaplex, the resort. Essentially, it's Sword Art Online's your body into one of 3 attractions: roller coaster, water park, and the beach. The attraction only lasts about 5 minutes, but you can pay extra to experience Hyper Time, where they shoot adrenaline into your body, making it feel like you're in the game for much longer. All the way down to an hour long at setting 1. But if you turned it to setting 0, the person would feel like they're in there indefinitely. It's not safe to do that. Cara sneaks back into the attraction after her friends move on, and convinces a worker who's about to go on break to let her in, put her at 1, and send her to the water park. Which he reluctantly does, but because of his nerves and being called to cover another shift, he accidentally leaves it set on 0 with no supervision. The rest of the story sees Cara wandering through never-ending water parks of different themes, but more and more frequently seeing a girl at the bottom of the pool. She's incredibly pale, wears all gray, has long black hair, green eyes and green veins pointing to her eyes, black fingernails, and black teeth. She beckons Cara to the pool, begging for help and asking to not be left alone. Cara feels sorry for her, especially because she reminds her of her childhood friend Peggy, who died in a way that Cara possibly could have prevented but was too scared. She thought this is her chance to make that right. But when Cara tries to help the girl tries to pull Cara down, attempting to drown her in the pool. Cara breaks free, but the girl appears in every pool Cara walks past. Even when she took a break to sleep in a pizzeria-themed location, she woke up to see the girl halfway towards her crawling on the ground, and she realized that she's not safe even on land, and that she has to keep moving. What feels like days go by as Cara wanders water park to water park, eventually hitting on 2 important areas. The first, an old wooden house, where supposedly she finds out more about this girl in the pool. She finds what looks like the girl's room, what looks like her parents' room that has signs of a struggle and the smell of blood, as well as a picture of the girl and her parents with clothing from a different time period. The house does start to flood though, and Cara runs to the attic, where she finds a bathroom, a tub, and the girl in the tub water inside. But when she gets too close, the girl grabs Cara and pulls her in. They're transported to a larger area of water and Cara breaks free. The next area of interest is a mirror maze. Cara walks in hoping it would be safe, but before long, it starts flooding too. In the mirror maze, she starts seeing reflections of her friends and her parents complaining about her and saying mean things about her, really delving into Cara's worst fears. Eventually, the story ends when Cara finds a water slide with no ladder stretching all the way up into the ceiling through a glowing hole in the ceiling. Hoping that's her way out, she climbs the exterior of the water slide to try to get there. But when she's nearly up, she hears the voice of the girl once again beg for help. It scares her, and she falls. Now with broken legs, the girl from the pool simply drags her into the water and drowns her. Back in the real world, when her friends finally find her at the VR attraction, they go to yell at her, but when the headset comes up, they notice that she's dead. Story ends. Okay, I know that was a lot, but the books are becoming more and more lore relevant, so we have to take those little literary detours every now and then. Sorry. But the real debate around this story is what the identity of that pool girl is. Some folks are saying that it's a manifestation of the Mimic 1 program, and for a while, I did too. After all, this girl is aggressive. Sure, she only ever begs for help, but the moment Cara gets too close, she tries to drown her. Something that Cassidy wouldn't do. The girl also reminds Cara a lot about her childhood friend Peggy, who died young. A tactic that Mimic 1 would definitely use to try to ensnare somebody, just like William would use facts about children's lives to ensnare them. The green eyes and veins pointing to the eyes also point to this connection. But then, there are issues here. The other side of the argument points out that when Cara is describing games she used to play with Peggy, trying to figure out how to survive now, one of the games she mentions is Save the Princess, a pretty direct nod to Princess Quest in the games. The Princess Quest that sees Cassidy as the princess. Furthermore, a character inextricably linked to Cassidy is Old Man Consequences, always seen fishing by a pond. But each time you meet him, either as Cassidy or the player of FNAF World, you can force your way into his lake and and drown. The ending you get by doing that in FNAF World is even called the drowning ending, the same name of this story. So the girl always being at the bottom of the pool works here. Another point for her being Cassidy is, although she is violent towards Cara trying to drown her, she is always begging for help, asking to not be left alone and wanting help from Cara. Furthermore, her description is quite close to how we've seen child spirits depicted in the games: gray clothes, pale skin, black hair. And if the house they went into in the water parks truly is a memory, then the picture tracks too, because the people in it look like they were dressed from a different time period. Drowning takes place sometime during a Pizzaplex, so at least around 2025 plus, probably 2030. Cassidy would have been killed back in the 1980s. That's a 50-year time gap. We are 7 years away from being 50 years away from the 80s. God world. However, this house also has a point for the Mimic 1 side, as the girl being in a bathtub seems to imply that she was killed via drowning, which, as far as we know, isn't a tactic William ever used. Although maybe that's what FNAF World is trying to imply, and maybe that's why she's so vengeful, it's unclear. Both sides have valid points here, so which one could we possibly choose? Well, I think it's rather simple. The girl in the pool isn't simply the ghost of Cassidy stuck in this game, nor is she a manifestation of Mimic 1. It's much worse than that. So Slices, let's pop our theory into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. She did it. Cassidy had won. Finally, through life and death and rebirth, she stopped William Afton. His reign of tyranny had ended. Cassidy held William right where she wanted, unable to die, move on, and find peace, stuck in a never-ending torment of Cassidy's design. Or so she thought, because while they were in that burnt-down, demolished pizzeria, someone unearthed them. Someone took William's corpse for something. Cassidy leaves the Ultimate Custom Night space to ensure that William isn't somehow coming back again, but it looks like he did. She sees Burntrap and the Blob, and immediately goes back to work. Her first order of business? Manipulate an arcade machine. Try to get into the system that William might be in. There's even a possibility that she's done something similar to this before, if she helped out with Happiest Day or with the FNAF World. The obvious choice for possession is Princess Quest. She goes through the minigame and finds traces of William, but nothing too significant. But then, she found it, and what she found was way too much for her to handle. It wasn't Afton's spirit, which she expected, not even close, but a program created to mimic everything it saw. She can handle spirits possessing robotics, but as a spirit, what can she do about a program? She wasn't prepared for such a powerful threat, let alone prepared to what would happen if she walked directly into its trap. Mimic 1 just laughs at her, says that it always comes back, and the game ends. It always struck odd to me that the game just ends there. And the next one that we play, Princess Quest 2, per Ozone, starts with a parallel to Old Man Consequences in the same room, which I agree with, but that's the crux of the theory. In every other game, you find Old Man Consequences when you messed up, when something bad has happened, because Princess Quest 2 and 3 never happened. Or at least aren't happening in the same way that Princess Quest 1 does. What we see at the end of Princess Quest 1 is Mimic 1 winning. He traps and engulfs Cassidy, eventually even turning her into a slave as he did Vanessa and Gregory. The girl in Drowning, that's her. Even if the story Drowning hasn't happened yet or in the way at all of the games, that's what Drowning is trying to tell us. Cassidy is somewhere in this code as well, but she's different. She's begging for someone to save her, but will kill anyone that comes close. She's still the girl Afton killed, but now she's the rage that Mimic 1 created. Or I'm looking way too much into this stuff. No way did a book come out in 2023 that essentially tells us the exact methods used during FNAF 4, and I'm not kidding. But be warned, Tales from the Pizzaplex number 8, the book we're talking about today, doesn't come out until October, so spoilers for Phobia, one of the stories inside, ahead. But believe me, you are going to want to hear this, because it might even tell us what's going to happen in Help Wanted 2. Slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. FNAF 4 has always been sort of a tricky beast. Is it dreams? Is it real? It's hard to tell. When it first came out, all of us were pretty sure that it was meant to tie up all 4 games in a fairly nice bow, saying that all of the past games were nightmares by one unfortunate child. But then Sister Location came out and pretty much insisted that FNAF 4 was real experiments done to someone by William Afton. There is evidence for both sides of this argument, so let's start with the more common interpretation, or classic rather, that FNAF 4 is just a dream. The most evidence for this theory comes from the game itself, and its surrounding media. After all, we played the entire game in the bedroom of a child, presumably as a child according to our height, and we're facing off against animatronics that are literally labeled as nightmares. So that's pretty straightforward, but that's not even all. There are things in this game that really only make sense if they are real dreams. For example, rarely you can hear the FNAF 1 phone call played in reverse during the night. Why would this audio play if this was all sort of some weird experiment done on a child, rather than a piece from another one of this child's nightmares leaking into this one? Another piece of confounding evidence comes from the handy-dandy survival logbook. At one point, a page in this book asks, "Do you have dreams?" in which the person using the book, Michael, draws Nightmare Fredbear. All of this feels really definitive, but then there's more games after FNAF 4. The evidence against dream theory is equally strong, if not a bit stronger, but most of it comes after FNAF 4. This is honestly why a lot of people think that FNAF 4 was originally intended to be just a dream, but after some negative fan feedback, Scott changed course and went for a very literal sci-fi approach. Is that true? I don't know, probably. But let's look at the evidence for FNAF 4 all being real, actual experiments. In the very next game, Sister Location, we see a secret office in the bunker that's presumably under the FNAF 4 house, where we see a few monitors next to a Fredbear plush with a walkie-talkie. If you punch in 1983, the same year the crying child presumably got bit in FNAF 4, you get video feeds of the FNAF 4 hallway and bedroom. Not only that, but on the breaker map in this game, that office is directly connected to a map that perfectly resembles the FNAF 4 house, or at least the part of the FNAF 4 house necessary for the gameplay. The monitors and connections here all really point to the fact that some sort of experiment or observation was going on in the background of FNAF 4. Furthermore, that plush Fredbear. Throughout the minigames of FNAF 4, the crying child's Fredbear toy talks to him constantly. It comforts him and keeps him safe and reassures him that tomorrow's another day, and even though his life is rough, his best friend Fredbear is here for him. This walkie-talkie could be Sister Location telling us that William Afton, or whoever's doing these experiments, is actually the one talking to the crying child during the day, whereas in Dream Theory, that Fredbear is either an imaginary friend or a haunted toy. So that's about where the debate sat for quite some time. Both sides have valid points on whether or not FNAF 4 actually happened in the real world or if it was just nightmares. But the debate is nearly over now, thanks to the book coming out soon. So it's time for everybody's favorite part of these videos. Rai has to do a brief summary on the plot of a book, story because either it's not out yet, it came out very recently, or because it's a book 90% of the fanbase hasn't read it. Time. Luckily, although this story is about 70 pages or so, a lot of its plot can be condensed pretty heavily because a majority of the story is very important environmental design, and we can talk about the environmental descriptions briefly as we go. The story follows a boy named Rory who's been having recurring nightmares every single night. The nightmares take place in his bedroom where he's attacked on all sides by metallic monsters. A fox from his closet, a chicken and bunny from either side of his room since there's 2 doors that never stay quite shut, and a bear from under his bed. Yeah, I wasn't kidding, this story is literally FNAF 4. It describes the room in such vivid detail, it even mentions the toys that are on the floor in FNAF 4. Anyway, he turned 7 not too long ago, but he's still been having these nightmares. But the story takes us through the rest of his day when he's not asleep. He wakes up and gets ready for school. We also get a nearly one-to-one description of the FNAF 4 house. He notes that his dad has already gone for work and his mom is in the shower. The story mentions multiple times that his mother is sort of a neat freak, and by sort of, I mean really, to the point where crumbs on a counter can get him in trouble. He makes sure to clean everything as much as he can because of this. He eats, grabs his bag, and gets ready to leave. But as he does, he realizes he can't find the front door. He thought it was in the living room, but there's no door to be found. For whatever reason, he can't remember where it's supposed to be. He starts wandering around his house looking for an exit and getting drowsier as he does. Finally, he ends up tired back in his bedroom and notes that the sun is almost down. He must have lost track of time and missed his day of school, but at least he got to stay home. He also notes that the steady hissing above his bed is a comforting sound that is constant throughout his house. A direct quote, as this will be important. The steady hissing from above his bed sounded like a subdued murmur, as if someone, maybe Rory's mom, was saying, "Shh." letting him know everything was okay. The story goes through 2 more cycles of this. Horrible nightmares, wandering throughout the day, repeat. But at the end of the 3rd day in the story, a sound like a struggling engine suddenly gets very loud and then stops just behind one of his walls. After it stops, everything is silent. The engine, the hissing above his bed, it's all quiet. He goes to bed that night and doesn't have any nightmares. But when he wakes up, everything is different. The pristinely clean house he had been living in is something more akin to a horror set. It's rusted and covered in dust and mold and disgusting. But he himself looked strange and different. Much longer, taller, and hairier than he thought he was. In his mind, he had just turned 7 a few months ago, but he seems to have the physique of a 17-year-old and a deeper voice to match. He explores the area, noting that there are metal tracks lining the floor from where the monsters in his nightmares would come from. Following them, he does find the monsters, but they're slightly less scary, more marionette-like, and not active or alive. All 4 were accounted for. He keeps exploring and finds that every exterior door in this house is fake. The only real ones are the ones to his bedroom, and those never stay shut. Even the fridge is fake, only holding nutrient-dense wafers that keeps him alive. Whatever he thought was food was really this. But he realizes that the wafers had to come from somewhere, and he breaks through the fridge. He finds a completely dark area, but with a flashlight does find the engine that was disrupted, along with some gas canisters and some paperwork. He's able to figure out that someone was doing experiments on him as a 7-year-old, but the place had been abandoned for about 10 years. The experiments were to pump the room he was living in full of hallucinogenic gas to induce constant nightmares without the relief of daytime activity, to see what that would do to the human psyche. Unfortunately, the entire setup is automatic, so when it was abandoned, it just kept going. That revelation nearly ruins him. He'd been locked in this nightmare chamber for a decade, but he knows he has to get out. As he explores further in with his flashlight, he begins describing pretty much exactly the sister location bunker, Circus Baby Party and Rental, with the 4 Funtime animatronics present at the location. Eventually, he not only finds an inactive elevator, but his old walkie-talkie from childhood, the same one that his only friend Wade also had and kept onto for memento's sake. Miraculously, it works, and he's able to get a hold of Wade. He tells him everything that he knows, but he's trapped in a bunker and can't see the outside, so he doesn't know where he is, just what he's inside of. Wade tells him that he'll call the police, but in the meantime insists that he tries to find a generator to make the elevator active again so he can escape. So Rory goes to do that, and does find the generator, but before he can turn it off, an unseen voice tells him to stop. A deeper, more calming voice. It tells him that this place has kept him safe, warm, and protected for so long. It's watched over him, and he's never been alone inside of it. The voice reminds him that Rory ran away from home in the first place because he felt unwanted. His dad was away at work and never home. His mother, a neat freak who was so particular about every detail that he couldn't keep up. His school was disappointed in him because of his bad grades. The children didn't like him. This was the only place that he was welcome, safe, and comforted. Rory thinks about it and decides that this is the only place he could call a home. In his mind, if he was already an outcast, what would a 10-year developmental setback do to him? He would be miserable out there, but here he'd be protected and safe and never alone. He resigns, and he plugs the gas machine back in, soon feeling much warmer and comforted. Then he goes off to bed. We then cut to the source of that voice, a tape recorder clicking stop and beginning to rewind. Quote, "The cassette was once again ready for the next time Rory wandered too far." I know, right? This one is super messed up, like one of the most messed up FNAF books I've ever read. But let's talk about it. I've seen some people say that this book is literally FNAF 4 and also even gives us the answer to Midnight Motorist. But I don't think it's that one-to-one. What I do think is that this book is giving us the exact means and method that has been used in the games, and possibly confirms that FNAF 4 was a dream and an experiment. How? Well, bake with me here for a second. Some key takeaways here. Presumably William had created a locked automated system in which a child could be kept and hallucinogenic gas would be pumped in. This actually has game evidence to back it up. In Sister Location, there are gas canisters everywhere, especially in the custom night, so much so that an entire game mechanic of custom night is centered around those gas canisters. And there's also another detail in FNAF 4 that most of us paid no mind to but could further back this up. Many houses have vents in the walls. Sure, it's uncommon, most of them are on the floor or low, but a high wall vent isn't anything special typically, so most of us paid no mind to the one in the FNAF 4 bedroom. But in Diop, we're explicitly told that the nightmare hallucinogenic gas is pumped into Rory's bedroom through a vent above his bed. This story also backs up the theory that William is the Fredbear plush. That pre-recorded cassette tape functions nearly exactly as the Fredbear plush does in the FNAF 4 minigames. It reassures a child that all is well and to go back to what they're supposed to be doing. Okay. Also, shout out William Afton for not only literally gassing this kid until he couldn't think straight, but then gaslighting him to make sure he didn't. What a girl boss. Wait, he literally gaslit the kid, gate kept him inside, and girl bossed him back to sleep. William Afton is the gaslight gatekeep girl boss of our dreams. Anyway, this could even explain one of the key issues with the William Afton as Fredbear plush theory. Folks point out that in this one scene, the crying child is within Fredbear's, leaves to go towards deeper in, but if you turn around, you see this purple entity helping somebody into a springlock suit. Now, we all pretty much can safely assume this is most likely William Afton. After all, someone helping someone into a springlock suit would pretty much need to be William or Henry, as they're the head honchos there. But William is the only one that's ever depicted as being fully purple. But if that's William Afton, how can he be back in his bunker talking to the crying child and watching over him? Well, this dialogue here could literally be a pre-recorded cassette tape like we see in Phobia. It could just be stuffed inside the Fredbear plush. Is that unlikely? Yes. Is this possibly just a light retcon? Yes, but it's worth pointing out. Either way, I don't think this counterexample is incredibly meaningful. Quick aside, we're reopening the self-made shirts that me and my wife do on Etsy for a short time. We took the feedback from the first batch, and this time we're doing a lot more to tweak it to what people were asking for. So thank you again for working with us in this process. It'll only be open for a short while, so we don't get overwhelmed. Hopefully y'all like it. So does this mean that FNAF 4 is literally us playing as some kid named Rory being tortured by William Afton? No, at least I don't think so. While it's possible that William was kidnapping and torturing random children to test out the effects of fear and agony, and that could still be true in the timeline, I still don't think that's exactly what FNAF 4 is telling us. And I want to start discussing that with Midnight Motorist. On the surface, I get the argument people are making connecting Phobia to Midnight Motorist. A lot of people are saying that Rory is actually the kid that runs away in Midnight Motorist. After all, Rory is the first confirmed runaway kid we've had in the series. But I don't think this is the case. The main argument is that Rory ran away from home after feeling unloved from everything in his life, including his family. His parents, while not outwardly abusive, were not good parents. His dad was never home, his mother was a clean freak who was very critical of him, scrutinizing so much that dust or crumbs left out would cause her to be mad at him. So he ran away. And yes, the Midnight Motorist kid runs away, but do any of those descriptions of the parents line up with what we see in Midnight Motorist? In that minigame, the father comes home. It's late, but he's home, and he's aggressive and abusive. And the only other person we see, presumably the mother, is resigned, slouching on the couch watching TV, passively telling the father to not abuse the kid. This doesn't line up. In a story like Phobia, every description is a specific choice. They chose to perfectly describe the FNAF 4 bedroom to make it very clear that this is what we're seeing. They chose to nearly perfectly describe Circus Baby's bunker to make sure that we knew this is what he's seeing. So if they wanted to describe the parents and link Rory to Midnight Motorist specifically, why would they not perfectly describe or even closely describe the parents of Midnight Motorist? They easily could have done that and still made it work within the book of Phobia. Just describe the father as abusive and alcoholic, or if that's too far, just describe him as mean and angry all the time. You could describe the mother as distant and apathetic, watching TV all day, but they don't. They describe the father as absent and the mother as a neat freak. They chose very differently, and I think they did that on purpose as to not confuse Rory with the only other confirmed runaway child from Midnight Motorist. But even more than that, if you don't like that line of logic, at the end of Midnight Motorist, the father says he's run off to that place again. What place would that be for Rory? And as far as we're aware, he's only run off that one time. Where would this again come from? That again alone really puts a damper on the theory that Rory is the kid from Midnight Motorist. But if that's the case, and Rory isn't actually the kid from FNAF 4, who is? Who's getting experimented on, and what exactly is FNAF 4? Well, the answer to that, I think, is actually in another story from the same book, Alone Together. The plot of this story isn't important for the theory, so no more summaries or spoiler warnings. What is important is what the grandma tells in the story to the main character on what happens when a ghost starts to haunt somebody. She explains the specific steps that get bigger and bigger as the ghost continues to haunt someone. So what is the very first first step that she tells him? Quote, 1. You start to have funny dreams and flashes of memories that are not yours. It's like they possess your thoughts when they're near. Now, pieces are starting to fall into place, and honestly, I couldn't be happier, because I already called this. Let's watch a bit of my timeline from December, shall we? Crashes on her due to the rain, and the daughter goes to possess the puppet. We then see the Midnight Motorist cutscene, otherwise known as Later That Night. This is why I think this happens right after. I don't think this is actually showing anyone running away. I think this is showing the dysfunctional family just after the bite of 83. It shows a mother completely disassociated, flatly watching TV and plainly remarking to her drunk husband, who's not allowed at the local bar anymore for how much he's been drinking. It then shows Michael Afton, who did break out of his room, but not to run away. I think Michael had been sneaking out to visit the crying child in his morning, either while the crying child is at the hospital or possibly in this unmarked lump, which I think is a grave in the woods. William, angered that he would even think to go there since he partially blames him for the crying child's death, resolves that he'll be sorry when he gets back. I think this is hinting to the fact that he switches Michael to a room with no escape. He locked the window, Michael broke through the window. So logically, he'll put him in a bedroom that has no windows, the FNAF 4 bedroom, and I'll get to why that's important later. He begins tormenting him every night from that bunker, unlocking the access to the animatronics and cameras with the code 1983, the very year that his youngest son died, partially from the hands of his oldest son. Note, I want to be clear, this isn't the FNAF 4 gameplay. I think William is doing this with the animatronics that he already has. However, these actions do create the FNAF 4 gameplay, because this torment that he puts Michael through gives Michael long-standing nightmares from here on out, where he relives these experiences even when not sleeping there, with nightmarish, illusionary versions of the animatronics that were sent after. Just saying, it's pretty close. But how do I know that FNAF 4's gameplay is the nightmare of experiments done to Michael and not just the experiments themselves? The later nights. Think about it. In every point of this franchise, when the crying child starts reaching out to Michael Afton, it reaches out with Golden Freddy, and Cassidy being there as well, as far as we're aware. I know the two-spirit theory is still debatable in the community, but I'm running with that for now. That crying child and Cassidy are both within Golden Freddy. But even in FNAF 1, FNAF 2, when Golden Freddy reaches out to Michael, it's telling him, it's me. He's just trying to reach out to him. He just happens to be within Golden Freddy. And what do we see in FNAF 4 but the same thing happening? Michael Afton keeps having these horrific nightmares of what happened to him, and the crying child can sense that and wants to communicate to him. But when he reaches out, he can't overpower the trauma and nightmares that Michael has. He just affects it. And suddenly, the several monsters attacking him is just one, Golden Freddy. You could even explain Nightmare as Cassidy, Shadow Freddy, the agony reflection of what happened on that day. But that's a little far, to be fair. That's already amazing, and I'm very happy with that theory. But I mentioned at the beginning that this book could tell us what's going to happen in Help Wanted 2. How is that possible? Well, even if you disagree with what I think this book tells us about FNAF 4, hold on to your seatbelt for this one. Throughout the story of Phobia, one constant description of the gas is the hissing noise it makes while being dispensed. While it's functioning, and at all times, the gas makes this hissing noise. Rory even says at one point, quote, and remember I said remember this for later, the steady hissing above his bed sounded like a subdued murmur, as if someone, maybe Rory's mom, was saying shh, letting him know everything was okay. The gas sounds like hissing, almost shushing from his mother. And what's the last noise we hear at the end of the Help Wanted 2 trailer? Right before the Ballora jump scare. Music, but music that fades out with this noise. Did you hear it? That shushing? I don't think Help Wanted 2 is going to be an in-universe VR game like Help Wanted 1. I think someone is going to go down to the sister location bunker for some reason. But this time, the nightmare gas leaked from the experimentation chamber, and it's throughout the whole bunker. It'll be our job to turn it off and get what we came for before losing our sanity. What do you think? Honestly, I'm really proud of both of these theories, and I'm like 95% sure about the Help Wanted 2 part. Thanks to the new Tales from the Pizzaplex book, number 5, The Bobby Dot's Conclusion, we now know more about the blob, where it came from, and possibly how Glitchtrap got into the Pizzaplex. But be warned, it's weird. So slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. First, let's gather our ingredients. Okay, what is this mythical story? I guess we should dive into what it's about before we discuss it. It's called the Storyteller, named after the main piece of robotics that the story centers around. Here's an as brief as possible recap. In an attempt to lower the budget, head of the company, Mr. Burrows, suggests that they create an AI connected to the rest of the Pizzaplex in order to make up stories and directives for the animatronics and attractions. That way they could fire the creative team and instead focus on maintaining this creation, which they dub the Storyteller. Head of the creative team and old man, Edwin, is furious at the idea, insisting that it can't work because human creation is what drives Fazbear Entertainment. They go along with it anyway and start creating a gigantic machine in the center of the Pizzaplex, all housed within a giant fake baobab tree. The Storyteller itself is under incredible secrecy as nobody is allowed to look inside the tree. It also has a series of fiber optic cables going from the tree throughout the entire Pizzaplex, acting as a sort of roots of the robotics, but also controlling everything within the facility. It connects to every animatronic housing, attraction, and facility. While they were building it, Edwin snooped around and noticed that they placed the head of the Tiger Rock animatronic inside of it. We're not told his history of the thing, but we are told that Edwin then has a panic attack relating to memories about that animatronic, blood, and screaming. A few months later, when the Storyteller is finished and activated, things start going wrong pretty quickly. The animatronics all take on hyper and aggressive versions of themselves, much like we see in the games. Roxy becomes a bully to customers, Chica becomes really snarky and snippy, as does her cupcake. Note here, Chica is described as being yellow and having a cupcake with her. Definitely not the glam rock Chica design. Monty is described as being aggressive or isolating and flip-flopping between, and even Freddy takes on this really funny diva role where he kind of just turns into a spoiled child. Edwin knows that this is probably due to the Storyteller, so he does even more snooping and makes his way into the baobab tree. Lo and behold, when he gets in there, he finds that it's one large supercomputer with the tiger head animatronic directly hooked up to it. He does some hacking and finds out the animatronic primarily came with a program called Mimic 1. He then spends the next few days going in every day trying to rewrite this program to fix the issue. Mr. Burrows is informed that Edwin keeps sneaking into the baobab tree, and he then blames Edwin for all these issues. To get back at him, he eventually locks Edwin in when he sneaks in. He does this secretly in case things go wrong, but the baobab tree is airtight. He assumes that within a day or two, when the air starts running out, Edwin will have no choice but to beg to be let out, and people will find out that he's been messing with things. But several days go by and Edwin never does. Getting paranoid, Mr. Burrows opens the door himself to see what's going on. He finds a dead Edwin in the middle of drawing a stick figure, as well as a piece of paper with a crayon writing, "I'm sorry." Before he can leave though, the door behind him shuts. Mr. Burrows starts freaking out, tries to log in but his password doesn't work, punches the Tiger Rock animatronic head to no avail, and even rips it out of the wall. But even when it's entirely disconnected, all the lights stay on and the Storyteller keeps working. Mr. Burrows suffocates in there as well. This one is a doozy, and even more than GGY was. But we've got our ingredients, so let's start mixing them and seeing what kind of theories start to form. Right away, this primarily seems like the book trying to tell us how Glitchtrap was brought into the Pizzaplex. I don't think that Tiger Rock is canon to the game timeline. Or if they are, they're going to be added in Ruin. But the idea of the Glitchtrap virus being hosted on an animatronic head that was brought into the Pizzaplex, completely reasonable and tracks with what we know. But okay, I hear you. We gotta talk about the goddamn tree. Is this canon to the games? Is it purely a book thing? I frankly have no idea. I know we don't have evidence of a baobab tree in the games, but again, it could be introduced in Ruin. Hear me out. The Pizzaplex has undergone several renovations and continues to do so. Roxy Raceway gets rebuilt every other day when it collapses. We know they had to fix whatever that mess in the basement is, possibly looking more into that in the future. But having a giant tree that was built in the Pizzaplex and crumble and no longer is there, while it's unlikely, it's not impossible. So the real question becomes, if that is possible, is it necessary? Why would this ever have to exist in the first place? Well, let's think about what it was fundamentally. The Storyteller was a giant supercomputer housed within a baobab tree. It was eventually powered and presumably corrupted by the influence of Glitchtrap. But most importantly, it had a mass of root-like fiber optic wires throughout the entire Pizzaplex. Those wires connected it to everything, so there must have been a lot of them, right? And if the tree is gone, we would have to ask, where did the wires go? Is there some sort of mass of wires hidden deep within the Pizzaplex? Yeah, the blob. Something about this thing never sat right with me. Most of us, myself included, took one look at this thing and went, oh, that's the result of the fire from FNAF 6. I mean, look at it, it's a mass of burnt robotics, done deal. But is this really what it would look like? The blob is almost entirely wires with some animatronic parts within it. The thing is basically a mass of inky black tentacles. Why would burning down a fake pizzeria and 4 animatronics result in something that looks like this? I think this story is giving us an out, another way of looking at the blob. A centralized AI network that coursed throughout the entire Pizzaplex, became corrupted, and was abandoned. And the blob itself told us this. The blob is sporting out a bunch of animatronic parts, but one of them sticks out more than anything else it has. This FNAF 1 styled Chica. Now we know it's not the original Chica from FNAF 1 because we see this foxy torso in Rockstar Row. And the foxy torso is rusted and damaged beyond repair, so presumably all the FNAF 1 animatronics would be in a similar shape. This Chica, on the other hand, looks in great condition. It's a little battered and bruised, but it's not rusty. For a while now, I'd been working off the assumption that the newer animatronic parts that didn't make sense were coming from extra copies of the Five Nights at Freddy's special delivery animatronics. But what if that isn't true? The Storyteller's story isn't just about the storyteller. It's also about the Pizzaplex and the people there, and the animatronics. It goes into detail about how Chica is yellow and has a cupcake. We know that's not Glamrock Chica. In fact, it sounds a lot closer to the FNAF 1 Chica design we already know of, one that would match to the one we see on the blob. If the blob really was this giant wire network that lashed out, maybe it took this Chica animatronic along the way. It wouldn't be the first time that an animatronic was destroyed and replaced at the Pizzaplex. We already know this happened with Bonnie. Hell, this might have happened with Foxy too at this point. The only one of the original gang left might be Freddy. But that sounds like a theory for another day. So does that mean the Baobab tree existed in the game's timeline? I don't think so. Hear me out. Just because the Tales from the Pizzaplex books have been a lot more closely linked to the security breach continuity than the previous books have been, we don't have to assume that everything in these books is one-to-one with the games. When they have direct parallels, that's great, but I think much like the original trilogy, the books are primarily here to tell us what is possible within this universe, so we can apply that logic elsewhere. It's almost like the books are giving us the rules to a game that we already bought the pieces for. One of the stranger things in the Storyteller, in my opinion, is the centralized unit, Tiger Rock. I really don't know why this animatronic was chosen. Like, don't get me wrong, he's cool and all, but I think he's just in the books. We have absolutely no mention of a tiger animatronic or a Baobab tree anywhere in the game timeline. I think that these are our parallels. I think what this book is really trying to tell us is, hey, at some point in the history of the Pizzaplex, there was a big hollowed out thing built to house a centralized robotic system. That centralized robotic system had wires going throughout the Pizzaplex, and the head of an animatronic was placed on it to aid in those wires doing what they needed to. But the head had the Glitchtrap virus in it, and everything started going wrong right around then. Now, our job is a bit more straightforward. All we have to do is figure out what this giant thing was and what head could have been placed on a mass of wires to cause all these issues. And I think the answer has been right in front of our eyes the whole time. Another thing that always bothered me is on the path to the Afton boss fight. This giant Freddy head makes no sense. Granted, I've heard some people explain it away as part of the signage for the FNAF 6 building, but I don't think that's true. First off, we get this art of the FNAF 6 building, which doesn't look anything like something that would have a giant Freddy head. Sure, we have this sign, but it's in 2D. But more than that, look at the model. That's an odd Freddy head. That's not FNAF 1 Freddy, it's not Toy Freddy, it's not Funtime Freddy, it's not even Rockstar Freddy. The closest Freddy that head looks to is Glamrock Freddy. Maybe like an older version of him. That, plus the fallen infrastructure around it that matches the infrastructure within the Pizzaplex, makes me think that this was part of the Pizzaplex that caved in. I think this giant hollow Freddy head was an attraction, possibly our Baobab tree. Alright, that's settled, but now we need something to attach to the computer and by proxy the wires. Something that could have housed the Glitchtrap virus. Well, let's look at the blob. And guys, sometimes the simplest solution is the answer. I know it seems improbable, but what if it's just Funtime Freddy? After all, it's the current centralized unit of the blob. Why wouldn't it have been the centralized unit before it became the blob? It seems pretty perfect, but I hear you. Why Funtime Freddy? Why would he have the Glitchtrap virus? virus? To be honest, I'm not sure. My best guess is that there's been a slight retcon in the design of Molten Freddy. We know that Ennard split up into Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy when they couldn't get along, but I think Steel Wool might be trying to redesign Molten Freddy into having the original Funtime Freddy mask, not this amalgamation of junk. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure though. Maybe we'll get more insight into that in Ruin, but I don't have a better answer than this, because honestly, I don't know where else Funtime Freddy could come from here. All that aside though, let's pop our mixture into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. Earlier into the Pizzaplex, but not too long ago, the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment wanted to cut corners, save some time, and rekindle the old wonder of Freddy Fazbear's franchise. He wanted to see if they could run the entire Pizzaplex from one centralized AI network, basically have it run itself. He could cut labor, cut programming, and even cut creatives. It was perfect. And what better way to house this computer than inside the face of the franchise itself? A giant Freddy head, one that could greet guests and tell jokes, but also could house a supercomputer inside. A supercomputer whose wires went throughout the entire Pizzaplex, connecting to charging stations for the animatronics, Rockstar Row, the arcade, the atrium. They implemented it and it worked fine, but it was missing something. That little spice of life that was always in these animatronics. The CEO ordered that they went and go found the old parts that were used to scan into the VR system. Surely something there had to work. But if they did that, there's no way that the VR development team wouldn't hear about it. The VR development team that Vanny was a part of. Vanny informs Glitchtrap, and they hatch a plan to put Glitchtrap into whatever they think of bringing to that storyteller. Eventually, it's decided that they'll go for an old Funtime Freddy head. But before they take it out of there, Vanny implements the Glitchtrap virus into its programming. And just like that, Fazbear unwittingly gave complete control of the Pizzaplex back to Afton. Total access to the animatronics and all the facilities. So then what happened? Why did they fail? Because something else was on that Freddy head. Sure, Glitchtrap was in the software, but the hardware was possessed by something much stronger than a virus. The spirits, the remnant or even agony or both, of restless ghosts. Cassidy, possibly the other missing child incident victims, remained. And this clash sent the supercomputer into overdrive. Wires started flying, animatronics went awry. Chica even destroyed herself and was taken by these wires. And before anyone could do anything, the whole head collapsed into the floor, burying itself under the rubble. Then, Fazbear did what Fazbear does best and paved over the mess, hoping to cover up the incident and leaving whatever that angry mess of wires was to hopefully stay. Whew, okay. Right away, do I think that that is 100% correct? No, not really. I'm not super confident on how the blob went from being this supercomputer throughout the Pizzaplex to hidden underground at a place nobody but Vanny is supposed to know about. That part I'm super foggy on. Frankly, we don't have any information there. I kind of just guessed using what we have and what we know is possible. However, until proven otherwise, I am 100% certain that these two pieces belong together and are where the blob came from originally, and probably where Glitchtrap was inputted into the Pizzaplex in the first place. It just fits so beautifully, and it parallels perfectly with the books. It explains this head that we've had no explanation for, and it gives more reason to the blob other than, I guess it's just a mass of wires. But what do you think? Did I finally lose it? Let me know in the comments. Once again, the books are coming in hot to solve lore that we just had no leads on. Last time it was Phobia with FNAF 4, and now it's Alone Together with the MCI and how Charlotte works. Look, you know it's a wild theory because I stood up for it, all right? I think this will help me think better. So if you guys don't mind, I think I might record better like this, but we're gonna find out. We're experimenting together. I've never done this standing up. I'm usually just, I'm seated, but I cannot sit for this one. This one is crazy slices. Put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. Although these sections I'm still gonna be sitting down because honestly, I love pacing, but my green screen is way too small for me to pace in front of it successfully. So we'll start with what we already know from the games. FNAF 1 is pretty sparse on lore. I don't think Scott Cawthon imagined that this game would turn into a 9-year-plus franchise with a movie and book series when he was making it. Actually, it's not a thing. I know for a fact. In several interviews, he stated exactly that. But what little lore this game does have appears on the randomly spawning newspapers in the cameras. Those newspapers talk about an incident where 2 and then 3 more children go missing. A suspect was convicted, but the bodies are never found, so it's implied that whoever was convicted got away without any kind of punishment. We also get reports that the suits begin to smell rancid and eventually the restaurant closes. With later games and books, we've come to know this as the missing child incident, where William Afton kills 5 kids and stuffs their bodies into the animatronic suits to be able to hide the evidence. All of this happening at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Important note here, we're like 99% certain that this Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that it's talking about is an earlier version of the restaurant before the FNAF 2 location. That way the suits are already haunted to become the Wizards. It's also called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but a different Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. But again, the animatronics are the same. This is where Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy get their original ghosts that possess them. So in order, it goes Missing Child Incident, or MCI, at a Freddy's location, then FNAF 2 happens, and then FNAF 1 happens presumably sometime after that. But the Wizards isn't all that FNAF 2 showed us, because the FNAF 2 minigames began to give us a small glimpse into how those suits became possessed in the first place. The Give Gifts, Give Life minigame shows the puppet giving 4 seemingly dead children all a gift, and then an animatronic mask. Once all 4 are put on, Golden Freddy jumpscare happens in the middle, with presumably a 5th dead child where it spawns. Now this is confirmed later in FNAF 6 to be the working of Charlotte Emily, the dead daughter of Henry Emily, the co-creator of Fazbear Entertainment. We get direct confirmation of this in his speech at the end of FNAF 6.
Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It's time to rest, for you, and for those you have carried in your arms.
But we never really get how this works. The answer was always, she just knows how to do this and does it anyway. But I think that figuring out exactly what's going on here as she's shepherding these souls will not only help us figure out the MCI, but it might even help us solve some of the more cryptic parts of the lore. Specifically things like the Happiest Day, FNAF World, even Golden Freddy to an extent. And to figure this out, the new FNAF book slots perfectly into our evidence. The main chunk of what we'll be using for evidence today is one of the stories from the new book that just came out. It is officially out, so I will be still careful about spoilers because like just came out, but I'm gonna be less careful about it. Tales from the Pizzaplex number 8, B72. Where the hell is my book? Hold on. B72, this one, the one with the dogs on it. There's dogs on the cover. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Alone Together. It's the second story in the book, and before we get too deep, you know it was coming. We got to do everybody's favorite. Rye has to summarize a FNAF book because most of the fan base either cannot afford it, does not want to buy it, does not want to read it, or for any other valid reason cannot access the book. Time. Luckily, the summary will be very quick. Y'all ever see The Sixth Sense? It's that. Anyway, so moving on. No, okay, but for real, Alone Together follows this kid named Travis, right? Nobody likes him, relatable. But his classmates like straight up actually ignore him. Like nobody pays attention to this kid. His dad barely talks to him. Realistically, the only good conversation this kid gets in his life is when he talks to his grandmother occasionally when he's coming home from school. Partway through the story for his woodworking project, Travis wants to make a mechanical Turk. Now, if you don't know what that is, nobody does. The book had to explain it like 4 times. Essentially, it's this old cabinet that had a chessboard on top and a little automaton that would play chess for you. Now this is really old, and it's really old because it's not actually something that works. It was an illusion where someone would hide in a hidden alcove of the cabinet and play chess, but it was like a very early magic trick. Regardless, he thinks it's really cool and he wants to make one, with Sun being the little automaton that would play chess. He starts doing research on this, but he starts getting these weird like thoughts and memories that aren't his, and he gets confused, and there's like he'll get deja vu for things that he hasn't done yet, and he gets this very tight pain in his chest kind of often. He asks his grandma about it, and she tells him that it's likely a ghost attached itself to him and needs help moving on. Now, Slices, this is the really important part of the story, so pay attention to this. His grandma gives us the steps of ghost possession as well as what it takes for a ghost to move on. The steps are as follows. 1. You start to have funny dreams and flashes of memories that are not yours. It's like they possess your thoughts when they're near. 2. You can feel chills or a tingle on your arm or back when they're around. 3. There could be sudden movements of objects or sounds out of the blue. 4. If they really attach themselves to you, sometimes you can hear thoughts in your head as if the ghost is talking to you. 5. And if you are really gifted, and this is pretty rare, you might even see the ghost with your own eyes. And like I said, that's not the only important thing we get here, because we also get how a ghost moves on in this universe. Quote, "Yep, if it is a ghost," she told him, "your ghost may have died at your school, Trav. He might need you to help find him so he can move on. He could be trapped in that thingamajig waiting to be discovered. Wouldn't that be something?" And before that, she goes more in depth with, "A woman who had died many years ago in my daddy's land, most ghosts linger around the place they died, especially if their remains are undiscovered. They travel around the places that are familiar to them." The rest of the story is Travis just trying to find the body of this ghost so the ghost will leave him alone, and spoiler alert, he finds his own body dried up and dead in that mechanical Turk. That's why his entire school, except for like one person, wouldn't talk to him or look at him. He literally wasn't visible. That's why his dad barely talked to him. He was mostly talking to himself in grief over Travis. The final important thing to note here is that when Travis does find his body, of course he's scared and confused at first, but then all of his memories come back and he feels finally at peace. He remembers how he died, he remembers what he's been doing, he remembers that his grandmother is also dead and that's why she can talk to him. For the first time in a long time, Travis is happy and then the story ends. Yeah, I gotta be honest here, this story is not scary at all, but it is incredibly depressing. But I feel like some of you already see where I'm going to go with this, so there's no sense in beating around the bush here. I think this book tells us exactly how Charlotte Emily helped the MCI kids, even how she created the Happiest Day, and I think it settles a minor debate that I've seen going on in the fanbase. What does the puppet exactly do with the MCI kids? Alone Together's entire plot is a ghost needing to find its body to be able to find peace. Not necessarily move on, but at least rest. This story, in my opinion, makes it pretty clear what Charlie does as the puppet. I've seen some speculative debates on whether or not Charlie was actually the one to stuff the bodies into the animatronic suits, or if she just gave life to those animatronics. Because of this new book, I think that second one is much closer to the truth. I think Charlie was the one leading the spirits to find their bodies so they could find peace. Sure, we have to wonder why she's sticking around in the first place, but I think Travis's grandmother gives us the answer to this. She states, in a cryptic way as to not blow Travis's mind, that she had already found herself. In other words, she knows that she's dead and her body has been found. She simply remains in this world to be able to visit old friends and speak with Travis. So in this universe, it seems that ghosts can stay around, they just are more inclined to if their body remains unfound. So with all that in mind, let's paint a picture of what likely happened using this book. Then we'll circle back for FNAF World and Golden Freddy and all that stuff. Charlie is killed outside of a Freddy's location, the marionette shutting down on her because of the rain. She's left outside and in public, and because of that, she's found pretty much immediately. Her spirit can move on if she chooses, but she doesn't. She doesn't have to move on even though her body was found. And like the character Encyclopedia states, hold on. Yeah, it's been here the whole time. I don't know if y'all knew that. Charlotte's spirit lingers on as more spirits are still trapped inside metal prisons and Afton is still present, which is why she is still active in Pizza Simulator inside of Lefty. If she senses that William Afton is still around and able to do stuff, then she will remain to try to stop him from doing stuff. Charlie tries to reach out to her father to no avail. For a long time, there's nothing she can do, until William starts killing again. This time he kills 5 children and he stuffs their bodies into animatronic suits. This way, even though he's convicted for the children going missing, the bodies are never found and he gets off scot-caught free. But when those spirits start to materialize on the other side, they're lost and confused. They don't even realize they're dead, they're just wandering the pizza place as if it was any normal day. They're just a little ticked off that a lot of people don't seem to even recognize that they're there. Charlie is the one that helps them. Her giving gifts and giving life is leading those ghosts to find their own bodies in the animatronics. This not only gives them peace of mind, but allows them to start manipulating the animatronics in question, at least in some limited way. We see this process more thoroughly in the Happiest Day minigames. These minigames aren't literally happening, nor do I think that Charlie is manipulating an arcade game to get this accomplished. We're seeing a recreation through these minigames of Charlie going through the pizzeria and finding those lost souls, letting them know that in fact they're dead. And that's why everything doesn't make sense, and that's why everything's terrible. But she's able to lead them to their bodies, giving them their gift of life again. So if that's the case, what about the ending of Happiest Day where they move on? And that's the snag for now. Because if this cutscene is to be believed, Once Happiest Day is done and they all move on, well, except for Charlie according to the character Encyclopedia like we've stated, do you see the issue? If Charlie leading the ghosts to the animatronics is what allows them to move on, how are they ever possessed for any stretch of time in order to attack Michael or William? How would they have any time to be the animatronics that we see in FNAF 1 and 2? And then later down the line in sister location in FNAF 6? Well, I think I have an answer for that, but it is messy. So let's talk about Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy is a lot of things, and confusing seems to be the main one. With the names we get from the security logbook and the characters we get in the Stitch Wraith stingers from Fazbear Frights, I personally think that it's safe to assume that Golden Freddy is two spirits. Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, and the bite victim or the crying child, the kid we play as in FNAF 4, the youngest son of William Afton. The one thing that the book makes very clear is that ghosts have an incredibly difficult time moving on unless their body is found. That's something that can't easily happen for the bite victim. From the hospital equipment we see in FNAF 4, it's somewhat safe to assume that the bite didn't immediately kill him, but rather put him into a coma-like state for some time and then he dies. If that's true, his body wouldn't be hidden at the pizzeria. Rather, I think it would be hidden in this mound we see in Midnight Motorist somewhere in the woods. Still hidden, just somewhere else. Somewhere that I think Michael frequently visited due to his guilt for being basically someone who helped kill his brother. And that's what we're seeing in Midnight Motorist. Michael frequently breaking out of the house to go visit the bite victim's grave. Just like Charlotte's staying if William is still around, I think that the rest of the MCI kids also stick around for some time just to help the crying child move on. We kind of see this in the Happiest Day where it looks like they're all working together to help the crying child. I think this is what happens now. And I think it's even possible that Cassidy is able to rope Michael into helping them, which is where I think FNAF World comes in. I'm not kidding. Okay, bake with me here because I think I have the full story of the MCI kids, Charlotte, Michael Afton, and how they all help the crying child move on. We go back to Happiest Day, but we stop just short of it. Charlotte is able to help the missing child incident kids find their bodies and find peace, but she can't find the crying child's body anywhere. They search the pizzeria, but to no avail. The search goes on and on, but they just can't find him here. They've got no leads. No one really knew this kid anyway, and he can't remember anything about himself because he doesn't have his body. But just then, in this old, closed Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a young man signs up to be a security guard, Michael Afton in FNAF 1. The bite victim recognizes him and tries to call out to him with "It's me." Michael sees this, but he's more taken aback and shocked than actually understanding what's going on. That's when Cassidy has the idea to reach out to Michael through his security logbook. She tries to keep jogging the bite victim's memory with Michael present, all conversing in this logbook. That's why the three voices are in this book. The red ink is Michael, the faded text is Cassidy, and the changed text as the crying child. She's trying to prod the bite victim using Michael, but Michael starts to catch on to what's happening. He might not fully understand yet, but he sees that weird things keep happening to his logbook. We even see this happen in the logbook where he starts responding to Cassidy himself, like when Cassidy asks, "Do you still have dreams?" and Michael draws Nightmare Fredbear. It's almost like Michael and Cassidy are working together to help the bite victim. It's almost like Michael and Cassidy are working together to help the bite victim. Through this logbook and the nearby arcades, Michael is able to figure out that in order to move on, someone needs to find the bite victim's body. And that's a location he would know. He snuck off to go visit it all the time as a kid. That lump in the Midnight Motorist woods. He goes, he digs it up, and he finds him. His long-dead kid brother. After all, why else would the big lore finish of FNAF World be going into some secret part of the woods and the game suddenly ending? It's to mirror what Michael is doing in the real world to assist with this, going into some secret part of the woods and digging up his brother. And it's right then that I think the last scene of Happiest Day takes place. Cassidy is off doing Ultimate Custom Night, but those missing child incident kids and Charlotte are there to finally help the bite victim put on his mask and move on with the rest of them. Charlotte staying behind to make sure William stays down. We kind of went all over the place for that one, and I went all over the place as well. I kind of like pacing around for these, but I understand if it's a little distracting for you guys, and I'll never do it again if you hate it, but I kind of like it, so let me know.